Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. House Speaker Juliet Holness faces backlash for apparent breach of process. PSOJ surprised by increase in minimum wage but says members will adjust. And later in sports, 110-meter hurdler Hansel Parchment to open 2024 season next month. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kerry-Ann Simpson. Here are the details. House Speaker Juliet Holness is facing backlash for what is being described as a breach of process in her letter to Clerk to the Houses of Parliament Valerie Curtis, reprimanding her for dereliction of duty regarding the handling of Auditor General reports. Kirk Wright has our first story.
In a letter to Ms. Curtis on Friday, House Speaker Juliet Holness stated that Ms. Curtis's action in writing to the Auditor General brought the Parliament into disrepute. The letter was also copied to the Director of Human Resource Management and all members of Parliament. But President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, Teacher Clark Griffiths, believes there should be no written reprimand from any politician to a civil servant.
The politicians doesn't understand that there's a clear dichotomy between politics and administration, and that the politicians are not permitted to write to any person in administration about any particular matter, especially a matter of discipline. There's a breach of process, and that should have been channeled to the respective minister in the respective ministry, so that that can be channeled to the permanent secretary and done to the officer.
And in the letter, Mrs. Holness also recommended that a copy be placed on Ms. Curtis's personal file. Ms. Clark Griffith says this will pose a problem.
This is a disciplinary matter that was not even aired. I mean, the person doesn't get an opportunity to speak about it or to offer a response. A letter of reprimand of this nature would have to come at the end of a hearing, after hearing both sides of what happened. Not that you just go ahead and write to somebody like that. There's a process in dealing with these type of matters, and this is not the process to deal with it.
In the meantime, Ms. Curtis says she has not seen the document and therefore is unable to comment. Kirk Wright, TVJ News.
And Jamaicans for Justice Executive Director Michael Jackson says the reprimand letter sent to Clerk of the Houses of Parliament raises questions about whether the governance framework of Parliament is being followed. Ms. Jackson was speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106 FM this morning.
When you look at the Constitution, Section 47, which sets out the hiring and the firing of the Clerk of the House, the hiring is based on the recommendation of the Speaker, and it is done by the Governor General. The firing of a House Speaker is done based on a two-thirds majority vote of the House of Representatives. Certainly nothing within that framework, as it is set out in our Constitution, would give the House Speaker that authority to write a letter as the one would have seen, because certainly that letter reads like a disciplinary letter. And I think that has raised some red flags for us.
Heightened concerns this afternoon about the Statistical Institute of Jamaica's Statin's inability to complete the recent national census. Opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, says a decision has to be made as to whether the census is to be scrapped altogether or a clear timeline provided for when it will be completed. In reaffirming his position, Mr. Robinson says he has no confidence in the current approach being taken by Statin.
I hope we can get some specific answers. The Minister of Finance, in his budget presentation, gave a very long explanation about the issues, but frankly, again, we still don't have a clear path as to how we go forward. We are almost 2 years behind schedule. My information is that we haven't counted 1 million people yet.
And while pointing to concerns raised by some contract workers, he noted that the details provided by Statin are inadequate.
Many of the workers who you would need to go back out into the field, they are unwilling to do so because there are outstanding issues related to their payments. So I don't know what the plan is to finish it. Now, they have said they have completed field work with the contract workers, but they're going to be using other workers to go out there. I don't know if that is going to be sufficient to complete almost an additional 2 million people who need to be counted.
President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, PSOJ, Mitra Siaga, has reacted to the Prime Minister Andrew Holness's announcement of an increase in the national minimum wage. The minimum wage has been increased from $13,000 to $15,000 per 40-hour work week. He says while news of the increase has come as a surprise, it's a change his members will adjust to.
Businesses will do what they have to do to make it work. And I want to make it clear that PSOJ stands on the position that if $15,000 is a livable wage rather than 13, then that's what it needs to go to. We can't have people who are working that can't afford to pay bus fare and buy food and send the kids to school because the money that they're earning is not enough.
The minimum wage for industrial security guards is also to move up from $14,000 to $15,000 per week. This is to take effect on June 1. Now, Mr. Siaga explained what he termed a balancing act that will now have to take place.
We decide if there are 50 people in our organization, in say the average organization, that has to move from 13 to 15,000. That is $2,000 more times 50 times that's $100,000 per week more. You have to decide if that $100,000 is going to be worth it, or you're going to have the people that are currently doing the work try to do it and be less productive. So we are hopeful that this does not result in any layoffs.
Business operators in Negril, Westmoreland are calling on the government to immediately roll out the Integrating Water, Land and Ecosystems Management in Caribbean Small Island Developing States project. Their call follows a massive Morass fire along Norman Manley Boulevard in the resort town Monday night. Amoy Harriet reports.
This is the second fire at the Negril Morass in the space of a month. This time it started around 8 p.m. Monday and lasted for hours. Some business operators were forced to close their establishments due to the cloud of smoke that blanketed the town. TVJ News understands that up to news time, the fire still hadn't completely been put out. Some hoteliers are furious. Businessman Richard Wallace says the immediate solution to the recurrent fires is for the government to immediately roll out the Morass irrigation aspect of the Integrating Water, Land and Ecosystems Management in Caribbean Small Island Developing States IWECA project. Last month, during the tabling of the 2024-25 estimates of expenditure, the government earmarked $95 million towards the continued implementation and improvement of the project. IWECA aims to restore the historical hydrological and other physical processes in the Negril Great Morass.
This is a serious issue in Negril. The morass needs to be re-wet, and we need to get going with that project immediately. We cannot keep going through this every year and several times for the year. It's a bad situation. It's affecting commerce, it's affecting the residents. People are getting sick from the smoke and the soot. It is not a good thing.
Mr. Wallace also appealed for the water crisis in Negril to be addressed.
Right now, we are experiencing a chronic water shortage in Negril because there's no water in the pipes. NWC has to be rationing water because of the drought. We cannot allow these situations to get out of hand. Negril needs attention immediately, and we need to get the government to act on this situation now. Negril is in a crisis state. We need to have things moving along. We can't wait any longer.
When TVJ News contacted the Minister with responsibility for water and the environment, Matthew Samuda, he said he was unable to comment on the matter. The IWECA project, which first began in 2016, is slated to end in September of this year. Amoy Harriet, TVJ News.
It's time for a break. Stay with us. More local stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. Chief Medical Health Inspector for St. Mary, Rupert Stevens, has raised concerns about the quality of the water supply through the St. Mary Municipal Corporation. Speaking at the recent sitting of the corporation's monthly meeting, Mr. Stevens revealed that the chlorine residue fell significantly.
For January 2024, we recorded 86% satisfactory in terms of the samples that were tested for chlorine residual, but this fell to 33% as at the end of February 2024. So we found some supplies that were unsafe in terms of laboratory analyses: Mango Valley, King Spring, Donington, and Ainsville.
He, however, revealed that when compared to the National Water Commission NWC supplies and other suppliers, there was satisfaction.
75% of the samples tested were satisfactory. And for private suppliers, 100% of those samples tested were satisfactory.
It's now time for the Business Minute.
Guardian Holdings says it has secured a loan of 450 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars, which will be used for general corporate purposes. The total loan will be disbursed in 2 tranches. The company says the first tranche, valued at 382 million TT dollars, was disbursed last week Thursday with an interest rate of 5.35% per annum. The second tranche is likely to be disbursed at a later date for a facility of up to 68 million TT dollars, or the equivalent denominated in any other currency, at an interest rate of 5.20% per annum. Both Tranche A and Tranche B will mature in June 2029. The loan facility was arranged by Guardian Group Trust. Further afield, Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun will leave at the end of this year amid a deepening crisis over the firm's safety record. Boeing also says that the head of its commercial airlines division will retire immediately, while its chairman will not stand for re-election. The firm is under pressure after an unused door blew out of a Boeing 737 MAX in January, shortly after takeoff. No one was injured, but the firm's safety and quality control standards came under renewed scrutiny. Mr. Calhoun took on the chief executive role in early 2020 after the previous boss, Dennis Muhlberg, was ousted in the aftermath of one of the biggest scandals in Boeing's history. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Shane Masters.
Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, Venezuela's main opposition is condemning the Nicolas Maduro administration for what they describe as an attack on Venezuela's democracy after the party was blocked from registering their presidential candidate, 80-year-old Corina Yoris, before a midnight deadline. The party claims President Maduro has managed to block his chief opponents from challenging him in the July 28 presidential election. Polls suggest that Maduro would lose by a landslide if Venezuelan voters were given a fair choice. On the international scene, several people are nursing injuries after Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed this morning. The 1.6-mile-long structure collapsed after being struck by a large container ship passing below, sending vehicles and people plunging into the river. Maryland's Governor Wes Moore has declared a state of emergency as the U.S. Coast Guard is conducting search and rescue efforts. Maryland transit authorities have put detours in place as a major traffic pileup is anticipated. The White House says it is closely monitoring what it describes as a mass casualty situation, and the FBI has joined the investigation into the cause of the collision. And the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments later today on whether to restrict access to mifepristone, a commonly used abortion pill since 2000. An anti-abortion group sued the FDA, claiming the entity should not have approved the drug over safety concerns. The Biden administration says it hopes the court will overturn a decision to limit access to the drug. And those were the top regional and international stories.
Thanks, Amoy. We head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your midday sports with Jeremy Brown.